Creating compelling RPG campaigns. I think that's the title of it. I'll be your moderator. I'm Robert J. Defendi. We'll start at the the end with Paul and have everybody introduce themselves. This is also a great time to pitch anything you need to pitch, because at the end of the room we might be, running out of time. So if you want to sell something, it's a good time.
All right, thank you, Bob. I'm Paul Janess. I'm the author of the Iron Dragon series. I've sold about 20 short stories, a few novels. I edit books as well. I've edited the Crimson Pact series, 5 volumes, a demon-themed anthology. I'm just going to pitch the zombie rock opera, which is occurring at 4 o'clock next door. And we need lots of crazy people to be part of it, because it's an interactive, it's kind of an improv play, and the audience will be part of it. So go next door after this for the zombie rock opera. And I've been a GM since I was 10 years old. I'm 41. I still run D&D campaigns. So this is actually one of my areas of expertise.
I'm Lee George Cade with Geek Show Podcast. Have no idea how I ended up on this panel with this group of people here, but excited to be here. Really, I've been playing role-playing games since 1979, and I was 9 years old. So these two folks next to me actually kind of rocked my world when I was about 14, so thank you.
Me too.
Ditto.
I'm Margaret Wise, and 30 years ago at TSR, Tracy and I wrote Dragons 1 and kind of gone from there. I currently have my own RPG company called Margaret Wise Productions. We're doing our current product is the Firefly RPG based on the series by Joss Whedon. Yeah, and I do have copies of those down in the booth at 3014, or I will have copies. They were wandering around Salt Lake City, and apparently they died.
And as soon as we can figure out how to get them here by Nico, you can have your own. I'm Tracy Hickman. I'm the other half of Weiss and Hickman. And this is the 30th anniversary of Dragonlance, and we've done a number of things since. So, we're going to rock a panel on Saturday, actually.
Larry Elmore.
He is?
Yeah, Larry Elmore actually should be here this evening. So, come down
We
to
have
our
to bring
booth.
his stuff over too.
Yeah, we got to go over and bring his stuff. Your book, your games, his stuff, yeah. And I'm forming a new moving company. In my case, we've just got new books that are coming out on the web. Just came out. That would be way cool, and I would really appreciate it because my back's killing me. And we also have this Sojourner Tales storytelling board game that we kickstarted last year. We have on sale for the first time here at the convention. So if you can find our booth, which is alternately numbered 3009, 3014, or 3030, well, we're down there. It's down by the Batmobile somewhere, and you can find us in the back, actually.
Isn't the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man near you? Kind of?
Maybe. I haven't had time to
He's
leave the booth
close
to
by
find
your
out.
booth, so if you find the Stay Puft Marshmallow
He
Man,
moves around,
Actually, if you go by where the Batmobile is, to the back of the hall, right, toward where this room is, and if you find this gigantic wooden sleigh, that's not us. We're across from that. Yeah. So don't be enamored by the wooden sleigh. Come see us.
3014 is what it says on the booth on the sign above our.
Just show Marco one of Leo Polo.
Yeah, we're always fine. Yeah. Look for the giant sled. That's the best I can do.
My name is Dan Wells. I am completely unworthy to be sitting on this panel.
Not true.
With these two here. I'm an author. We've got a series of the John Cleaver books, which is supernatural thriller. The Partial series, which is young adult science fiction. New books coming out all the time. I had just last weekend lost 2 Hugo Awards, which was really exciting. And as most of the panel has said, I've been gaming forever. I'm usually the GM in the group, though not always. And I did have the wonderful experience for at least a year, if not 2 years. I was Paul's GM in a Legend of the Five Rings campaign. It was super fun. So
it was awesome.
Hi, I'm Bob Defendi. I'll be the moderator. As I said earlier, I got into gaming, I don't know, it was about a year before the Dragons of Despair ad started running in Dragon. And just changed rocked my world as a young boy who just loved dragons and really wanted to more dragons. And I put dragons in first level D&D campaigns. That was my thing. I love the new 5th edition first adventure with the blue dragon and the first level adventure. Yeah, that's me. I worked for Ironcon Enterprises on Space Master, Rollmaster, and Harp. I worked for Alderac Entertainment for Spycraft and Shadow Force Archer. I worked for White Wolf with Exalted. I currently have my own game company, Final Redown Press, where I have an Echoes of Heaven campaign setting and a moving Shadow campaign that inspired me to pitch this panel. Also, I'm with Hold 322 podcast, and we're doing a special thing. But if you collect there are 6 of us here at the con. We have cards. If you collect all 6 cards at the podcast recording, you get put in for a prize. If you get the coveted 7th card as well, you get a prize automatically. That person isn't at the con. We all have 1 or 2 copies. So it really depends upon who's nicest to us and flirts with us the most. It's not gender specific, dudes. But, so let's go ahead but I'll be handing those out after. So let's go ahead and start. We're talking about creating a compelling RPG campaign. So when you've got all your people, you either have a new game or you're creating a new group or just starting over from scratch. You're sitting behind your lovely writer's garret trying to come up with what you're going to do for your campaign. What kind of information do you want before you start the first session? How much, how little? Go.
A credible RPG campaign?
Yeah.
Oh, compelling.
Compelling.
Oh, that's even better.
Who wants to go?
Well, I never ran an RPG campaign in my life, so I'll smile and wave.
She just writes really compelling novels about that.
All right, I want to go then. If you guys, so my opinion is this: you have to plan the RPG hardcore before you play the first session. You might have this great idea for a campaign, and that's cool and all, and you want to do thieves, and everybody's going to be thieves, and you're going to do this Lankmar thing or whatever, and then you get your players together, and they're like, we want to be paladins! And you're like, right? You can't do that. So my opinion is this. You gather your players, and you have to be super selective about your players. That one guy who's just really bad and always ruins the games, guess what? He can't come. All right, you cut him off immediately. He does not even show up. All right, that is the most important thing. So Tracy cannot come to the game. All right, and you'll find out why later because he will say why. All right, and then you ask your players, what do you guys want to do? We're not going to do questions just yet. Okay, we're going to say, what do you want to play? Oh, I want to do this. I want to do that, and then you figure out what their character is and what their motivations are. And then you write the campaign. You can tailor that idea you had to their characters probably, but I think you should spend a ton of time, a lot, a month, 2-3 weeks maybe, talking to your players and getting them on board before you even show up. And you get them to buy into the whole idea of the campaign before it even starts.
What do you consider writing the campaign?
Well, I've kind of written a little bit before I get with the players, but as soon as I figure out kind of what it is that they really want to do, or I can maybe pitch my idea to them and then get them to figure out a character that will fit with that. But if you tailor it to the characters, you're going to have a lot more successful campaign than just deciding in advance you're going to do something. And then they hate it and they fight it the whole way.
When you say you write your campaign, what does that follow? Is that a series of loose notes? Is that a 3-ring binder with 500 pages? What is when you say then you write your campaign?
Start with 1 page, a 1-page summary of your 6-month to 1-year campaign. If that's usually all people can handle, 6 months to 1 year.
Right.
And you write your 1 page, and then you have like 5 or 6 ideas in there for adventures probably. And hopefully your first and second games is just all about the characters. Not necessarily their origin story, but all about some defining moment in their life that sets them off on the campaign. There is no inn where they meet, okay, and decide to go on a damn adventure. I will hunt you down.
Tracy.
No, I'm just kidding. You can do that, but
Come on, bring it on, Paul. Come on.
By the way, he's a huge...
Now you're going to be meeting me in that tavern, too.
I like to use a system called Roll20. It's a free system you can use online, and you can actually streamline and write your entire campaign through that and have all your campaign notes. You can even game on it. So if you have a friend in New Zealand that can't join you, Roll20 is perfect for that.
You can use Roll20 in the living room. I have a very bad back, and we can't really use miniatures, so we just put the Roll20 up on the television in the living room, and I just control everybody's miniatures for them.
With HDMI, it's fantastic what you can do with that. And I normally start with the antagonist first. That's the first thing I developed. If I have a good antagonist, then I have a good game that I can work off of. And from there, I'll try to do a one-off session with all of my players individually so that we can kind of get them used to the game, figure out what they're doing.
Me too.
And then I develop a nice in for everybody to meet in.
I am so on the wrong panel.
I buy snacks.
Margaret buys the snacks.
Yeah.
This is the Uncle Tracy tell me a story part. I'll tell you. First of all, I don't believe in role play by committee. I don't think that anything good comes out of consensus. I think that the nature of conflict actually opposes that whole idea. When we created Dragonlance, I started with tectonic plates. Ran the plates together. Those formed the mountain ridges and the continents and the shorelines, which oddly enough in those days had something of a hexagonal feel to them. We'll talk about that tomorrow or on Saturday. After running the tectonic plates together, we figured out what the ocean currents would be. The ocean currents then determined the weather bands and climate bands across the continent. Climate bands across the continent provided us prevailing winds, and coupled that with the oceans and the currents offshore, we were able to plot weather patterns across the land. The weather patterns across the land then determined rainfall. Rainfall then determined the location of the rivers. The locations of the rivers determined the spread of civilization, because civilization spreads first along rivers. Having then determined the spread of civilization, we then plotted 3,000 years worth of history.
And on the seventh day, Tracy rested.
No, he threw a rock at him.
No, on the seventh day, I threw a rock at the whole thing. Ruined it.
Yeah.
It's called
And
the
then
cataclysm.
Started all over again. The reason that we went through all of that was foundational and to give the setting depth and scope. We wanted, if there were ruins that were encountered, and because that's what you do in dungeons, you're always encountering ruins.
Especially the first adventure.
Especially the first adventure. We wanted those ruins to make sense. We wanted the ruins to exist here for a purpose and for a reason, to have history and place. And that's why we went to all of that trouble. Not that we necessarily thought that anyone would ever see that. In fact, we're kind of adamant that they not be able to see that. But we wanted everything to feel organic, and the structure of it to be organic. And so one of the first things we do whenever we create a world, whether it's for a role-playing system or whether it's for a novel, is other than beginning with the story, what is the kernel of the story? What are we trying to say here in the story? What is it about? When we're talking about world development, though, one of the first things we do is establish a Bible for the world that deals with history and maps and locations and civilizations, languages, magic, how magic applies technically to civilization, how it affects its economics, how it affects its trade. And this Bible continues to evolve as the story evolves and grows as the story evolves, and is always a working document and is never completed. We like to have that, even though you never see it, because it makes everything organic. It makes everything make sense. And you feel that fundamental foundation lying underneath everything reflected in the writing of the campaign or of the story, even if you never see it in print. So when we do world creation, we go to a great deal of trouble up front to make sure that the world breathes and lives, and that the people and the creatures that exist there spring out of its foundations naturally. So, other people have different ways of doing it. That's what we do. One of my favorite programs, and I'm sure you'll not be surprised with this, is by Pro Fantasy. It's the Fractal Terrain program. And it's a wonderful godlike feeling because you can say, not that world. No, not that world. Oh, that one's pretty nice save. No, not that world. Ooh, I like
like
that.
45 of them.
Yeah, you can really rip through a lot of world creations until you come up with the map that works for you. There's a great deal more to be said, and I suppose will be said here in the panel. But basically, at least for me, I like to evolve a fullness in the world. And I'm less concerned with creating the player's role within that world as helping the players find it. That's my approach.
This has been, with us, it's been kind of a challenge with Firefly because, there were 14 episodes in a movie. It's an amazingly rich world for all of that, but there's very little background on it. And with our company, we've been working with 20th Century Fox. They've been absolutely awesome to work with. But, trying to instill some of that depth to the world when we don't know much about it has been kind of a challenge. And we really, we would dearly love to call it Joss and, talk to him about it, but he's kind of busy. And so we have to do a lot of it ourselves. So there is that kind of interesting line you have to walk, particularly when you're dealing with licensed products.
So Dan, what do you prep with?
Okay, so I've never actually, for role-playing purposes, created an entire world like that. I'm always using kind of pre-published settings like L5R, Rifts, or whatever. And so for me, my process is very similar to Paul's. I want to find out what the players want, but also who their characters are. Designing the plot arc, the story arc of a role-playing campaign is really hard from a writer's point of view, because I have to figure out what the story is, but I'm not in control of any of the main characters. And so they get to do whatever they want. And sometimes they don't do what I want them to do. In fact, most of the time, they don't do what I want them to do.
Never happened.
You can sometimes learn all these little tricks of getting them to go down the right road, or regardless of which road they go down, they end up at the town you want them to visit. But
Guys,
more
the town is awesome.
guys, you really want to go left.
Look at these maps.
So, but the core of it, I think, the core of the campaign is the story and the characters and what they're going to do and what choices they're going to make. So once you figure out who they are, and this is why I love to just start with character creation. Let's figure out who we want to be. Do we want to be treasure hunters? Do we want to be pirates? Do we want to be whatever? Let's figure that out. Then make your characters. We'll figure out how everyone knows each other and what you want, what you love and what you hate. And around that, I can build an opportunity for them to tell the cool story and create the cool character moments. Those moments of sacrifice where maybe the player is going to say, yes, I'll give my life so everyone else can live. But the way you can structure it so that they do that is by knowing what they love and what they hate and building towards it.
I have a question into the panel.
Yeah.
Is the campaign about the setting, or is the campaign about the story?
The campaign for me is about the characters.
Me too.
It really depends on where I'm coming from. If I want to tell a story about a civilization, then it's definitely about the setting. Most of the time, though, in form, I'm mostly just wanting to see where the players go with the characters. It's their story.
Okay.
I was going to say, this isn't like black and white. Like, I'm not evil, like black and Tracy's white. Like, it's not like that. I totally respect Mr. Hickman, and he is one of the main reasons why I'm here. And I love a great, compelling world like Dragonlance. I mean, that is just an amazing world. So I might do a lot of world building before I go to the character, before I go to the players and say, you know, this is what I want to do. You know, I might build a big world, and then I might just kind of shepherd them in a certain direction. If they say, well, we want to play Chaotic Evil Knights, I'll be like, okay, no, we can't really do that, but maybe we can do this. And, you know, I might want to push them toward what'll work for my giant world that I just spent 3 months creating. But it's not perfectly character-centric, but my opinion is that any role-playing game is a taste group. We have a bunch of people, and hopefully they have similar tastes. I'm not saying there's not conflict, okay? There's going to be a lot of conflict between the players. But if we have someone who never wants to role-play ever and speak in character, and we have 5 other people who never want to break character, that dude has to go, okay? Or if it's the reverse, we got to get rid of that role player. We can't have him in the group or her in the group. So I think that getting your group together and getting the chemistry right is so critically important. And it's so important to totally understand the motivations of your players and understand what it is that they want to do.
And I'll point out for Paul here that it's totally okay if your group wants to do something for you to say, dude, I don't think I can sustain that. I'm not feeling that story, and you've got to keep my interest too. You know, I can't do a Chaotic Evil campaign. I feel icky all the time. I never prep. You know, I just can't run that. You know,
Well,
it's
and
totally okay.
I will say, to Paul's point about structuring your group with the right mix of personalities in it and styles, I have multiple times run 2 weekly role-playing groups, or at one point even 3, because that was the polite way of separating the people, you know? There was one guy who didn't fit into this group, and he wouldn't be right for that campaign. But he was one of my best friends, so I'll just run 2 games now so he can play them.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say what Tracy and I were talking about up here was that this is a real change because when I came to work at TSR, Gary Gygax's, Gary was all about the setting. You know, temple, whatever.
Elemental
Evil.
That nobody ever
That's
lives
an
through.
amazing campaign.
Yeah, you know, Roger Moore's Baba Yaga's hut. And,
Blackboard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote with my son and with Howard Taylor, both of whom are here at the convention. We wrote a adventure module supplement called Extreme Dungeon Mastery.
It's a wonderful book.
Yeah, you should go buy it.
Yes, please do. Buy
I
it.
think
In
I
booth
still
30,
have it.
whatever I'm in. But part of that talks about different player characters and their needs. And in that book, we talk about 3 different player character types. We're about to do a new supplement for it where we add a 4th player type, which I'll mention here. The first type is the fighter. And the fighter player, if it moves, kill it. If it doesn't move, kick it till it moves. Take its stuff, buy bigger weapons, and kill bigger things. If you have an entire group of players that is nothing but fighters, stick them in an arena and they'll be happy beating up on stuff all night. If you've got, the second type is a social player. And the social player, if it moves, talk to it. If it doesn't move, talk about it. Stay in character and speak with an affected voice. If you have an entire party of players who are nothing but these social players, right, and probably show up in costume, then put them all in that infamous tavern, get them talking to each other in character, and go out for pizza. They will still be there when you get home. The third type of player is kind of the type A player, the goal-oriented player. They want to know how to win the adventure. Even though this is a role-playing campaign and you can't really win, they still want to know what it means to win. They need goals, they need objectives. They will fight or they will parlay, whichever one's going to work for them best, as long as they perceive they are moving toward a goal. These players need an objective. Now, the 4th kind of player is the spoiler. The 4th kind of player comes into the game and their whole objective is to crash the game.
I hate that person.
These players, I prefer to invoke what I call the Jack Bauer rule, which is when Jack Bauer is confronted with a problem, he shoots it. And that's what you probably should do to those kinds of players. Yeah. Well, anyway, but the point is that when you're designing a campaign or when you're designing a game, these are the three elements that you need. You need to have conflict, physical combat, and social conflict. But you also need the social element. You need characters that are rich and deep and have with whom you can have conversation. And you need something that is an objective, even if it's an interim objective or a series of objectives, something that is perceivable as we need to do this. We need to go here. Because this addresses the needs of all those player types. So in designing campaign, if you want to do revolutionary France, that's fine, but you need to make sure you've got conflict. You need to make sure that there's physical conflict involved here and that not everybody's just standing around talking. At the same time, you have to make sure that there's enough conversation in here to help those players as well, and that there's a clear objective. These address player needs in general terms, but provides interesting motivation for all three types.
So we're 3 or 4 sessions in, and your players have taken your plot out into a back alley, with crap out of it, and done just defiling things to its hat.
Did
and
it really take 3 sessions to get to that?
That depends upon you. Some of them are still in the tavern at 5.
And I'm still crashing the campaign.
Right. So now your campaign is out the window. What do you do? How do you deal with the evolving needs of your players?
Okay, in my experience at this point, either one of two things has happened. Okay? First of all, either they are ignoring your story because they're telling a better one, or they're ignoring your story and just screwing around. At which point you either follow their better story, where as far as they're willing to go, and adapt to it on the fly and make up your own stuff, or you sit down and you say, guys, this has really gone off the rails. We're not really role-playing, we're just kind of getting together and eating pizza once a week. And if that's what you want to do, then that's great. And if not, then we need to take a step back. Having these kind of DTR sessions with your role players, it feels wrong the first time you do it because you're like, I don't want to break the illusion that this is all whatever. Just go ahead and do it because it is so valuable to kind of breathe life back into a completely shattered storyline like that.
I think the biggest mistake we get into when we're running a game is, and I'm sure everybody in this room can agree with this, you get to a point where you have become a rules broker, and that's, I think, where you lose the game, and that's where the game gets lost almost every session. So 3.5 goes to an open game license, and Pathfinder comes around, and playing Pathfinder and jamming this thing, we have one conflict, and it's going on for 2 hours. It's just a fight.
Because of a rule or something?
Because it's just everybody's pulling out the books and looking through the rules. And so this has become my obsession and my quest over the last 3 years. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing for a person with my kind of obsession. I'm finding game systems that will allow you to circumvent the runaway game. So you have Cortex. If you haven't looked at Cortex, this is a fantastic gaming system. And you can adapt it. I'm plugging this for a reason. It's a fantastic system. I'm sorry about the Marvel game, by the way, because that was a beautiful game. Cortex is adaptable to any situation. Monty Cook has Numenera and The Strange, fantastic game system that you can use and adapt to anything. And actually, that game system is fantastic because you don't get experience points from killing things. You get experience points for role-playing. That's the only way you're going to get experience and level your character up. So finding a game system that doesn't get so bogged down on the errata and all the different steps that you have to do to get through this stupid conflict that should only take 5 minutes, that'll keep the game on track. And so that's basically how I've been gaming lately, and it helps keep everything in I think that's why your games run away from you. People get bored after a while. They're just like, well, wait a second. Seriously, the sun was up when this fight started, and it's completely run out. So find a system that works for you. Find a system that you can explain. I'm actually really happy with the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons because it's really taken a lot of the out of the gaming session.
They don't even have flanking.
Flanking's out, but then that's where you have your advantage and disadvantage. It's fantastic, and you can get the rules free online.
Really simple.
Look right through it.
Okay, let me ask really quick for clarification. Cortex was the name of the system that was used in the Marvel game.
And Firefly.
Really, because that's a wonderful system. It was great. That's how I got my kids into role playing. Was we got that little Marvel book, and that's just a great system. It's so participatory, the way the players are able to interact and help tell the story.
I think somebody invented it. My team invented it because when I play D&D, and you can ask Tracy because he's been my dungeon master several times, I always have to ask what dice to roll when. I mean, I just totally never do. And I wanted a game that I knew why I was rolling the dice, and I knew what dice to roll.
And this is the result, yeah, absolutely.
Well, you end up with a game system where the better you are as a character at a certain skill, the higher the die you roll. So if you're just a moron like me trying to walk across the street, your agility roll is going to be a D4.
I remember probably 97 or 98, and I'm at Gen Con, and Tracy's doing a panel on how to run an awesome role-playing game. My friend Craig's with me. We're listening to him go on, and we loved everything he was saying, and there's one thing that stuck with me. No, it's good, Tracy. He's like, get through the fights as quickly as you can. Because you guys know that like 3-round combat that takes 2 hours, and it's just so mind-numbingly boring, and especially if you have like 9 players at the table. So that is, I think, really great advice. They're just guidelines. They're not rules. You know, we got so caught up in 3.5 and all these little details that it really slowed everything down.
Do you really need 7 books?
God, no. Rules Light, I think, are the most fun games that I've ever played, where we blast through it really, really fast. And you make the combat really evocative and cool, and people are doing neat things, and we're going bang, 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 around the table. It's really hard in a 9-player group, regardless of your rules. I recommend small groups, like 4 or 5.
We did it in Extreme Dungeon Mastery. We felt like it was rude to put out a game book that didn't have an actual game in it. So we did the XD20 system, and the basic XD20 system has one statistic. It's called My Stat. It's a very fast role-playing game.
It really is. And we do, my group does these Halloween games, and one of the guys hosts, takes over for a Halloween horror game every year, and it's almost always XDM. Almost always.
We did a...
Not just because he was the editor.
We did an episode of Geek Show where we're supposed to be introducing people to role-playing. I'm surprised. I've been role-playing for 30-some-odd years. It should be common knowledge, right? Everybody role-plays, right? Everybody? No, it turns out a lot of people don't. They don't even know what it is. So the whole goal was to do a live recording of a adventure campaign in less than an hour on a live broadcast.
It was awesome!
It was awesome. And I think we rolled the dice 3 times. That's your goal as the game master. You don't want to get caught up in the dice. Tell the story. Get your players involved. The more die rolling and rules you get involved with, the faster it's just going to go away from you.
I'd like to make a suggestion in just general philosophy. When it comes to games, and when it comes to running games, and for that matter, when it comes to campaigns. People ask me sometimes for advice, and my advice usually begins with, the guy who wrote Princess Bride. William Goldman. William Goldman says that story is structure. And to a certain extent, your campaign is structure. But what I've discovered about structure is that if you should hang on to a structure the way you hang on to a handful of marbles. If you try to force it the way you want it to go, if you try to force your characters in your campaign in the direction you want them to go and to follow the line that you have, and you squeeze so tightly to the outline and to the setting, well, marbles start shooting off, and then you lose your marbles. If, on the other hand, you take the approach that you're just going to let the characters go wherever they want to go, and we're going to just kind of change the setting as we go to whatever is going to like suit the situation with the character. And you leave your hand open and allow for every possibility. There's no structure here. There's no form, and so all the marbles roll off and you've lost your marbles again. But if you hang on to it, if you cup your hand into a shape, into a form, into a structure, and then let the marbles settle naturally inside that, then you can hang on to your marbles. And all of the marbles move naturally into that structure because the structure is there but isn't forcing them to go in any particular direction. For me, a campaign setting is very much the same way. We provide a structure with enough openness to it so that the characters feel that they have freedom to choose what they're doing and the direction that they take. But there's enough structure here that it exists to provide them form and direction in what they're doing. So I always look at campaigns this way. I look at plots the same way when we're writing. I look at a lot of things in life the same way. But in terms of designing your campaign, provide them with a structure inside of which they can naturally settle and move.
Tracy is an expert at losing your marbles.
Absolutely.
I'm going to take this opportunity to answer both of my questions. I follow the 3-act structure in everything I do. I plot a campaign, overarching campaign with the 3-act structure. I start off with, here's the setup, that'll be the first adventure, then there's a complication. About halfway through the campaign, there'll be a big twist, big reveal, going into the last few adventures, which are the climax, blah, blah, blah. I do that for the adventure as well. Now here's the important part. At the end of every game session, I look at it and decide, do I need to rewrite this thing entirely because of what happened today? Because there's a really good chance they will. And the important thing is the structure, not what's in the structure. When I publish all my adventures for Echoes of Heaven, every one of them, at the end of every encounter, I tell the GM what the dramatic purpose is. And the reason why I do that, I explained at the beginning, is it doesn't matter if they follow this adventure. What matters is that if you hit all of these dramatic purposes in a rough row, you will have a good adventure. You need some easy fights for the characters, for the players to bind their wish fulfillment to their characters. If they screw up all the easy fights, add another fight that's easy. Get them to feel powerful. You need some kind of complication. You need some kind of twist. If they've taken their adventure off in a whole direction, I don't care. Just when it comes time for the twist, give them a twist on this new adventure that they're inventing. Let them guide their characters, but make sure you still hit the structures. Make sure you still hit all the important points of a well-told story.
That is a really great argument, once again, for being very careful with your combat and not getting bogged down in the details of it. Because more often than not, what screws up your adventure or your game session for the night is the combat, because it balloons far bigger, and so you don't get through as much. And if you can keep each session to a story arc, we're going to start here and we're going to end here, and it's going to be dramatic and we're going to achieve something. That's so much better than we're going to get together for 4 hours and get through as much of this story as we can before everyone has to go home. Because if you end up doing that, 3 of those 4 hours is going to be a fight. Paul saved one of my campaigns once, this L5R campaign that he was in. He joined it about halfway through, I think, and so the first session he was there, it had become a very combat-heavy game, and it was kind of getting bogged down in that. So the first session, Paul was there, the whole group was camped in tents, and they got attacked in the middle of the night. And so, each person in their initiative order was kind of waking up and figuring out what they were going to do and grabbing their weapons and so on. And I was like, okay, Paul, it's your turn. And he was a Shugenja, which is like the wizard in this setting. And he said, I'm going to put on my war paint. And he spent 3 rounds just doing this. And then he said, okay, you've got the paint on. Your friends are losing the fight. What are you going to do? He says, I'm going to pray. And so he sat down and he put his staff on the ground and he prayed in his tent for another couple of rounds.
Well, there was
From
like a
that
tree
point
that
on,
caught on fire.
The rest of the campaign changed in tone after that, because the other players saw, oh, this doesn't have to be about rolling dice. This is about cool storytelling. The combat became easier to manage, and the characters became more interesting. And because of that, the story became more manageable.
I played a character once who conducted an entire battle with a loofah and in a bathrobe because he was bathing when the battle started. He was kind of a warlord type, so he just walked out there in his shorty robe that he had borrowed from the lady who had the bathtub, and with his big loofah, and he just directed the battle. You know, it was the most fun I've ever had in a battle.
I think it's one of the most important things we can do as a GM too, when we're guiding a setting or guiding any kind of campaign in any setting, is reward your players that are playing the game the right way. I mean, we kind of lose track of that. We get so caught up in throwing out the XP for the monster slayers. If somebody's playing right, I had a ranger once who completely derailed the game because instead of slaying the dragon, he negotiated with it.
Can we please not talk to the monster? No, talk to the monster.
Please don't talk to my XP.
I like what he said about play the right way, but I want to play devil's advocate for a moment. I'm going to agree with him, but what is the right way?
It depends on the character, right?
Thank you. Yeah, it depends on I say it doesn't depend on the character, really. It depends on the group, okay? Like, the group needs to decide what the right way is, all right? And if you won't conform to role-playing because you never, ever want to speak in character, maybe you need to go. Or if the group just wants to fight, and be really into the rules and real picky and they're power gamers and that's cool, whatever, maybe we just all need to be like that. The right way is what you guys decide is the right way. There is no wrong way to play a role-playing game if you're all having fun. Okay?
Yeah,
it's
let's
true.
give a round of applause on that. Come on. We've got 8 minutes left. Why don't we open it up for some questions? We'll start with this gentleman right here.
My group has just started a new campaign on the first time in 25 years of GMing, I have a party that is predominantly evil characters.
Wow.
And it's coming up with so many weird obstacles of things I didn't imagine, them murdering their way through diplomacy and them murdering children at one point. Can you give me some advice on crafting good storyline for evil characters?
Read the Book of Vile Darkness.
I would
That's
say
your risk.
pull up the Suicide Squad comics from DC Comics.
Oh, that's a good one.
And that will give you some plot points of how to actually make your evil characters heroes.
Necessary Evil.
Anti-heroes.
Exactly.
Have you ever seen the campaign Necessary Evil? The whole premise is all the superheroes in the world were destroyed by this alien invasion, and all that's left are the supervillains, and they don't want the aliens running their world. They were about to conquer that themselves. So,
That's the Mutants and Masterminds, right?
Necessary Evil.
Well, but that was the campaign.
No, it's for Savage Worlds.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I don't feel that way. I'm a paladin. I'm a goody-goody kind of a guy. I think that if you're going to have, I believe and have always often said that an evil character should have a short, interesting life. the definition of evil is antisocial, which means that the entire social structure of the world is against them. It seems to me that in most campaigns it is far too easy to be evil.
Yeah.
Robbing somebody is a roll, and so you just roll the dice and see if they rob somebody. Society exists to stop this sort of thing, which means that as far as I'm concerned in the campaign, if I've got people who really want to be evil in the campaign, it really ought to be a hard life and a hard road home. So, my attitude is whenever I've got a lot of evil characters in the campaign, the first thing I look at is what are the social consequences of being evil in this world? What exists here to stop it? And then unleash the hounds. That's me.
You have to remember that, look at the successfully evil people in our world, and they don't tend to be like just the psychopathic slashers. You have one killing spree and you're done. People who are really evil spend most of their lives doing good things so that they can get away with one evil thing eventually.
They also don't tend to work in groups.
Kaiser Soze is like such an awesome villain.
Do you really want to play the Bernie Madoff game, though? It's a lot of boring.
Let's move on to this question here.
I actually had a comment for you. You had to put out an evil campaign, and you worked it out by bribing the characters to do the right thing for the wrong reason.
That's good.
Okay, let's keep to questions though. Question back there?
Okay, I haven't DM'd properly since I was like 12 years old, and I'm considering going into it again. What would be your advice for someone who's starting out, sort of?
Set strong limits from the beginning.
Yeah, no evil characters.
Yeah, you know, no evil characters. Don't let that one person who always wants to play a fairy be a fairy, because that just adds too much chaos, or it makes your social situations much harder. You know, keep it strict, keep it limited, so that you can get your head around it, and then expand the scope as necessary as you feel.
And start simple.
I would add get a rule system that you're really good at playing in, so that you don't have to worry about the rules as you're jamming. You just don't know.
Screw the rules. Just make it up as you go along, and establish that you're going to be fair. Okay, I'm going to be fair. I might screw you over at this moment in the game. I tell you that right up front. You're not going to get to make your saving throw. You're going to be poisoned, whatever. But I'm going to be fair. You're going to have your moment. All right. You're not always going to get your saving throw or whatever it is. But you got to convince your group to trust you, and to go with you on the journey, and convince them that if they do go with you on the journey, it's going to be awesome and fun.
Don't get so caught up in the rules that you're just brokering the rules instead of playing the game. So if it's coming down to, I can't find the rules, flip a coin.
Yeah, that's why I was suggesting starting with something you know really well, so that's just not even an issue.
Yeah, the friend of mine was in that same situation a couple years ago. When I moved to Germany, he was the one who was going to take over as GM, and he had never done it before.
Larry Correa, if you know who that is.
Well, and two different guys actually, because I had so many campaigns going. But both Larry and this other guy, I gave them the same piece of advice, which is, you're the GM, cheat constantly, fudge dice rolls, do whatever it takes, to have the outcome. But like Paul said, be fair about it. Don't screw with your players just to screw with them. Screw with them in the service of a good story.
I cheat like a madman when I realize that I've screwed something up as the GM. I'll cheat like there's no tomorrow in favor of the players if I realize, I completely botched this.
What are some tricks you guys might have as a DM if your players have done a situation like Daniel was saying where they're telling a better story when you prepare? You have this whole story laid out for that evening, and they are now telling a story that is completely different. You got to react to it. What can you do at that moment at conflict?
I have two pieces of advice. One, a bathroom break.
Yes.
10-minute bathroom break. Say, I've got to take a dump. Go to the room. You got 10 minutes in there to think about what the rest of the session is going to look like. Then, as I said, go home and just rewrite your notes entirely.
Sometimes I'll ask them, like, okay, now you killed him. What did you expect to happen after this? Like, what was your grand design there? So, sometimes they'll just be like, oh yeah, I was going to kill him, and then do this, this, and this, and you just like think about it in the bathroom for a few minutes for real, and then you're like, and then you go with it. But sometimes you punish them if they made that bad decision.
I once told a group, I need 10 minutes because I'm really mad at you guys right now, and in 10 minutes I'll be rational again. and let's all just take a break, wander the store, buy something, and then we'll come back and we'll start playing again.
One thing you might consider, and it's not necessarily, one thing you might consider, and I have often considered, whenever somebody else is telling a better story than I am in a game, maybe I should be a player.
Well, it's a better for the GM, but what happens is that the dragons turn into contracts.
Well, fortunately, thanks to the 5th edition apology, we often get back to playing games.
We got 1 minute left, so how about the guy with
Yes.
that?
So, we just talked about how combat often slows down the RPG nature so that it's not fun any longer. And yet combat is one of the things that draws me to RPG in any way. Like, usually when I'm imagining the cool things I'm going to do, usually involves combat of some kind, usually not social. Maybe that's just the type of game right in. But I'm just wondering, is there a way to, keep up some heavy combat in it? How can we make that fun so it is fun in the RPG? That's really like a lot of fun.
you need to plan for it as a GM, because like Paul said, there's no wrong way to do it. And so while all of us kind of lambasted combat for a while, you know, we recognize that combat is an important part, and for a lot of groups, that's the most important part. I think 4th edition D&D proved that there was an entire subsection of the gaming population that that's really what they wanted, or at least that's what Wizards thought they wanted.
I want to read something because
Please.
it's more fun. This is.
We're on time, so this will be loud.
I know, it's going to be very quick. This is from Stephen Leacock, who was a Canadian author of the turn of the last century, and he wrote parodies of literary forms. This was the romantic combat that he wrote. Okay? Guido the Gimlet of Ghent is fighting Tancred the Ten-Spot for the hand of Isolde the Slender. The combat that followed was terrific. First, Guido, raising his mace high in the air with both hands, brought it down with terrible force on Tancred's mailed head. Then Guido stood still, and Tancred raised his mace in the air and brought it down upon Guido's head. Then Tancred stood still and turned his back, and Guido, swinging his mace sideways, gave him a terrific blow from behind, midway right center. Tancred returned the blow. Then Tancred knelt down on his hands and knees, and Guido brought his mace down on his back. It was a sheer contest of skill and agility. Does this sound like familiar combat to you? Too often we get involved in our combat. We hear the dice rolling in the combat. Maybe it's more important that the action be described and the outcome be the result of dice than every single blow.
Okay, we're over time, so let's have that be our last comment, and let's go around and applause the panel.